Sorry about that. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's Overview and Scrutiny Committee. It's the first of its kind. It is on webcam. It's going out to the wider audience, and it's unique in that for the first time, the whole of the council has been invited to come tonight to scrutinise the agenda we have tonight. So it is a unique occasion, and welcome and thank you for all of you who have turned up tonight. Thank you.
Chair, through yourself, if I could just say to members, if the committee, if you press to speak, we'll see it on the screen. But for everybody else, if you could just raise your hand, and Steve will take a note, and then he and I will ensure the chair knows which order. So if you could raise your hand at this meeting. Thank you.
Item 1. Apologies for absence. Thank you. Item 2. To report the appointment of any substitute members serving for this meeting of the committee. Do we have any substitutes? Thank you. Right. 3, to declare any declarations of interest on the members' code of conduct. And firstly, may I, if need be, declare that I am on the Overview and Scrutiny Committee with the combined authority in Birmingham, so I'll declare that. And if anyone else is in the room, please declare their membership of any committee in the CA. Councillor Stanley?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Kettle. Yes, like yourself, I'm a member of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee at Westminster Combined Authority, and also a member of the TDOS we know ourselves today, which is the Overview Screw for Transport. I'm on 2 of them down there.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Right. Item 4, to confirm and sign the minutes of the meeting on the 7th of December 2023 as a correct record, pages 4 to 11. Thank you. Now we're in the public forum. Does any member of the public wish to speak? By all means.
Hear me? Yep. My name's Ken McClymont. I'm from the Dudley Centre for Inclusive Living, which is a user-led organisation of deaf, disabled people and their family members. We have a number of concerns arising from the budget proposals this evening, relating particularly to adult social care and to children with special educational needs and disabilities. Our particular concern tonight is around the proposals on the Unicorn Centre in Amblecote, which we feel is a unique and bespoke service which cannot easily be replaced, and were it to suffer cuts or to even be closed, that the people who attend there and their families would suffer great distress and potential harm without that service.
Be Mr. Bowsher.
Oh, Matt?
Thank you. Good evening. Yes. So I think everybody in the council would acknowledge that the Unicorn has been a valued service for a lengthy period of time. It's on, Chair. Can you hear me now? Sorry, it appears to have gone off again. I'll speak with volume. Everybody would value the contribution that the Unicorn has made over the years. In terms of re-providing the service at Queen's Cross, as Mr. McClymont suggested, we acknowledge that there is a need for staff training and support to make sure that the staff have the right knowledge and expertise to deliver the service. We note that a number of people who attend Unicorn already attend Queen's Cross, so for some it doesn't necessarily represent a huge change. For others it will do. And we have to balance the overall cost of running that service with the availability of resource in the context that the council finds itself. There is a detailed equalities impact assessment that is in train, and we'll make that data available as soon as it's completed. And obviously that will be made available in the public as well for further scrutiny, either here or in the Adult Social Care Select Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Are you okay with that?
The director. When this story broke a couple of weeks ago and our group shared it on our social media pages, we were contacted by the mother of a service user, and she was quite concerned to learn of it. And she said when she'd approached staff at the centre, they had been told not to discuss or disclose it. Is this normal policy? And if it is, why is it? Surely it's beneficial for all to know about these proposals as soon as possible so that families and their cared for can make necessary preparations and changes? Or is there some kind of underhand plan to prevent those from knowing about it who will be most affected? It seems to me that there is a small group of people here who cost a lot of money and whom it may be seen as less troublesome to deal with than a larger group of people suffering a cut. But the impacts will be massive and could end up costing the authority more were the people attending Unicorn Centre to be moved into residential care instead, if that was the only place that the necessary support their families could get was available.
Any changes that go forward in the budget aren't legal as yet. They've got to go through full council. Therefore, anything that goes on at the moment is only hearsay until it goes through full council. It isn't legal. That's the reason for the confidentiality. And we do need to work that way, especially where other organisations and the business interests are involved. Is there anyone else on the in the public sector wanted to speak? No. All right, we'll move on. Thank you. Right. Item 6, the West Midlands Combined Authority, formal ratification of a single settlement memorandum of understanding between the West Midlands Combined Authority and Her Majesty's Government, pages 12 to 49. Who's going to lead on it? Are you going to lead? By all means.
Thank you very much, Chair. I believe there may be some slides to come up on the screen to accompany the presentation. That's
Sorry, could you introduce yourself so members know?
yes.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Peter Gibson. I'm from the West Midlands Combined Authority. I'm the Head of Policy and Public Affairs, and we'll be talking to you today about the single settlement, which is your agenda item. Next slide, please.
Councillor, go on.
People in the room, not acceptable. How are you going to make it accessible to the 2 people in the room? At least 2 people in the room.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to take that away. We can certainly bring the slideshow down for now. Happy to speak to it verbally, and then we can try and provide an alternative copy that meets that accessibility requirement. That's completely fair.
In the Equalities Act 2010, Disability Discrimination Act 1995. How are you going to sort it? And you need to think very carefully.
Councillor Harley?
True, because I don't believe the member and the other, certainly the other elected member that is in attendance here, neither of them are members of this committee. And to be fair to members of the Combined Authority, they wouldn't have known that other members of the council were in attendance tonight, to be fair to them.
Fair comment, fair. Paul?
So I think the slides were actually shared and uploaded to CMIS as well, weren't they, Steve, in advance? Yeah.
If I could come in, I think the councillor makes a valid point. What the officer from the Combined Authority has said is that they won't refer to the slides, they'll talk so that everybody gets the same presentation. The slides have already been distributed as part of the papers. So if we go through the presentation verbally, but we won't use the slides on the screen, and that way nobody is given any different treatment. But apologies for that. We are looking at making sure that prior to every meeting, we publicise the fact that if there are going to be accessibility issues, that we make the necessary adjustments. That work is underway. So apologies to the two councillors, but I think if you can work without the slides, they have been published, so everybody's got access to them. It's just the main salient points. Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Just to make the point, as a local authority, and if there are any other public authorities present in the room contributing to this committee meeting, this meeting is open to the public, and therefore the public sector equality duty applies, which means the public bodies have to go above that which is required of other organisations in the private sector to make sure that their meetings are fully accessible. So the fact that we have meetings that are open to the public means that anything that takes place here should be fully accessible. So I would support Councillor Denning in what he said, and I think as an interim measure, what the Deputy Chief Executive has suggested is okay for this meeting, but this keeps happening quite regularly. So if we can make sustained progress that sticks in terms of making our meetings accessible to the public as well as its councillors, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. By all means.
Thank you, Chair, and we are very happy to comply with all of those requirements, and we will do whatever we need to retrospectively to make sure that's right. Very happy to pick that with you up after this. So in terms of proceeding with the item today of the single settlement principally refers to an arrangement between central government and the West Midlands Combined Authority around how we will receive funding for a number of specific functions starting from the next spending review. It was one of the most significant features of the Trailblazer deeper devolution deal that was agreed last year. Only us in the West Midlands and Greater Manchester are beneficiaries of the single settlement, and puts the West Midlands alongside Greater Manchester as trailblazers for English devolution. We have agreed a memorandum of understanding with government. This sets out most of the key principles of how the single settlement will work in practice, but not all, and we are in the process of seeking to negotiate additional details with government, and then there will be an extensive conversation within the region and with local authority colleagues about how this works between us. The most important feature of it is that it will represent a consolidated funding grant for 5 key functions. They are local growth and place, local transport, adult skills, housing and regeneration, and net zero. And what this means is that where a fund is announced by central government in future that relates to one of these themes, it will be devolved automatically to the region. This will be devolved on the basis of a multi-year funding settlement. So at present, a lot of funding flows for 1 year or 2 year grants, whereas this will change that, and it will be a singular grant covering those functions over a multi-year period. That will, where a particular fund is announced that's within scope of the single settlement, remove the need for competitive bids, both from local authorities and also from the combined authority for those funds, which I'm sure is music to ears of local authority colleagues who spend a lot of time of their life writing bids. But it is a big step forward and will provide a lot more certainty, a lot more clarity, and a lot more ability for multiple funds to be used in tandem to achieve and address very complex issues like, for example, health inequality or poverty. The amount of funding we get, we don't know that at the minute, although we have agreed language in the MOU that we shouldn't be left any worse off as a result of the single settlement than if it weren't otherwise in place. That funding quantum will be decided by allocation formula. We are in the process of negotiating them with government now, with the objective that the first single settlement should arrive in the region on the 1st of April 2025, on the basis that that is the start of the financial year after the next spending review. Next slide, please. So there are some of the key technical details of how the single settlement will work, but what does it mean for the region and what does it mean for Dudley? I would say in 4 elements. The first is that it does change the nature of how decisions are taken about growth funding. At the minute, as mentioned, local authority colleagues and the combined authority bid for funds into central government. We have no accountability or no right of reply if we are unsuccessful. The single settlement will change that. It will devolve shares of funding to the region. That will mean it is a conversation between the local authority colleagues about how we make that work rather than a bidding process into government. So that is a significant boost for the empowerment of the region. And it will also mean we can be on the front foot in designing the types of local growth strategies that people and businesses and yourselves in Dudley need for your area, and we can plan them up front and then work out how funding then flows into them thereafter. As mentioned, because we will have the longer term certainty of the types of funds we will receive, because funding will be brought together into a consolidated grant, that will allow us to achieve more impact in addressing some of the complex problems that matter to people here, whether it is the transport system, whether it is, as mentioned, health inequalities, some really difficult things that take a long time to address. We will have the certainty and the funding flexibilities to be able to achieve them with ultimately greater veracity. And I would say that the last element of this and what it means is we will have more freedom over the types of projects that we can spend. The Memorandum of Understanding says that we will be able to spend the funding in any lawful way that achieves the outcomes, which will be much more high level than you need to build X amount of rail track here or X amount of bus lanes here. We will have much more flexibility of the types of things we can do as long as they achieve high level outcomes that we agree with government, which will mean the end of, to a very, very large extent, the end of interference by Whitehall and micromanagement in the projects that are right for the West Midlands. Could I have the next slide, please? So there are some of the principles of how the single settlement will be designed, but what does it mean next and how will we work together to implement this? The single settlement is a major programme of work for the region. It will mean looking at how we are set up, what our strategies are, how we take decisions, and ultimately how we are resourced to make the most of this really good opportunity for the West Midlands. It will involve developing new policies and strategies to make the most of the funding we get. It will involve, as mentioned, making sure we have the finance capabilities and systems in place to spend money well, to have overall oversight of the funds, and to make sure that our systems are as efficient as possible. And it will also make sure that it will also mean learning the lessons from the past. This is not the first time public funding will of course landed here. What do we know about what's worked previously, and what do we want to replicate, and what are the lessons that we need to learn as we go into this process? And as mentioned, for local leaders and for local authority colleagues, how we take decisions and how we work together between the combined authority and the local authorities across the region on all of this is a really big opportunity to make sure we've got that really strong partnership arrangement between us. Next slide, please. I won't be very detailed in setting out what next. As mentioned, this is a really big step forward for the region. It is a really significant part of our devolution deal. We have signed the Memorandum of Understanding and it was announced in November, but that is by no means the end of the story. There is a significant amount of work underway to make sure we have a really effective funding system to make sense and deliver all of this. I'd say some of the key milestones for colleagues would be Firstly, we expect the spending review in potentially November, which is subject to confirmation by the Treasury. That will ultimately set out the quantum of funding that will come to the region, and it will also formalise the outcomes that we will be held to account for. And then, as mentioned earlier, the other significant milestone for us is the 1st of April in 2025, which, assuming that is the start of the next financial year, that would be when the single settlement ultimately starts. But in between then and in between now, there is a significant amount to do across all elements of the single settlement process. And that is not the only thing that at the Combined Authority we are mindful of. There is obviously a series of elections, there is a range of other series of work streams happening, and we're very cognizant that this process needs to factor in and accommodate all of those extra milestones as well. And so I will leave it there, Chair, in terms of a presentation. I would say there are links available online that we can make sure are shared and cascaded in an accessible way if you do want to read more. And I would say we are very much open to your feedback and your questions, and I'm really happy to come and speak to colleagues one-to-one if you've got any particular matters or questions or ideas that you'd like to feed into the process. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. And just a reminder to councillors that the presentation, which we said would be referred to, is actually available on CMIS and was published two days ago. So if you want any background reading, it is on your systems and was on there. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Are there any questions from the floor? Councillor Ali?
Thank you, Chair. Just one question. It says that this single settlement will enable local authorities to develop place-based strategies. So can you just kind of outline how that will be different to how place-based strategies are being developed and done currently? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, for that question. It is so the process of developing place-based strategies involves our local authority colleagues identifying. So I should start again. So the single settlement, the funding we receive through it will benefit all parts of the region. We will continue to fund and will need to fund adult education in all parts of the region and transport provision in all parts of the region. The work we could do with place-based strategies will involve thinking, where is there an opportunity to take a more targeted approach to investing in particular areas? So that's not at the expense of other areas, it is in addition to other areas. And through that work, we are at the Combined Authority facilitating a process, but are very much listening to local authority colleagues as to where your priorities are for place-based strategies. Where are the types of investments that would be helpful to sparing the long-term growth of regeneration over 10, 20 years? We have the certainty through the single settlement of being able to plan over that time horizon, which is one key difference. And we do have the certainty of the types of funds that will be devolved into the single settlement across local growth players, transport, etc. And so the thing that makes the thing that is different about that is that we can be on the front foot in setting out where are the geographies, what is the plan for a particular area, and then we can then match funding that we know will be devolved to the region to make sure those plans are resourced. So I don't think we are saying this is a completely new approach. You will have been doing place-based regeneration for a long time, and I think we are very much wanting to learn the lessons of what has worked. I think the thing that is different is the certainty we will have the ability to bring different funding levers together and the ability to target change over a 10 and 20-year period and potentially beyond.
Councillor Ali, any further questions? Anyone else like to speak? Therefore, could I speak on local scrutiny, page 43, item 79, when they discuss the combined authority having the mayor in question and answer meetings with the MPs. Now, we've been talking about this for about the last 12 months on the CA, but no meetings have ever took place. In what kind of format do you expect these to happen and where will they be?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. So the reason a meeting hasn't happened yet is the terms of reference are yet to be agreed with DLUC. We received the final version last week, and they are making their way through the governance process at the combined authority. And then a meeting will take place once the terms of reference have been agreed and a meeting has been called. But it's the steer that we've had from the Minister at DLUC is that he would like a meeting to take place before the pre-election period, but there is gives us quite a narrow time frame to secure a meeting. So the terms of reference have been agreed now, and it's just making its way through the governance process, and we can expect a meeting either just before the pre-election period or after the election period has ended.
Occurred, and in all fairness, let's hope that when we go into the new agreement next April, we do things better at the CA than we're doing at the moment. Let's admit it. How many MPs are you going to invite? Is it possible to get a coherent agreement with all MPs there together in one go? Will they select who comes forward? How is this going to work?
So at the moment, the terms of reference aren't a public document, so I can't speak to them. They will be made public shortly, and they will go through the Combined Authority Board. And I know that your role in Scrutiny is involved in the process, and we'll see them. But it is the intention that all MPs in the Combined Authority region, so all the MPs that cover the 7 constituent authority areas, will attend the meeting. There's been the reason it's taken quite a long time is that we've had to agree them sort of alongside Manchester as well. Manchester obviously have the Police and Crime Commissioner functions. So there's been a number of issues to work out across government on their side as to what falls within scope and out of scope of these sessions. So I appreciate and acknowledge that it's been a long time coming, but we are at the end of that process now, and they will be in place shortly.
Major roadworks over 200 million have got to be passed off by the Ministry of Transport down in London. And yet one of the biggest bugbears we have locally to get anything done is dealing with the Ministry of Transport. Couldn't we get away from that and devolve all decisions away from London?
Thank you, Chair. I think you are referring to, if I'm correct, the provision in the MOU that says transport schemes that are above £200 million in value need to be signed off by a DfT minister. Yes, that is correct. Schemes between 50 and I believe £200 million, we will have to publish a business case publicly for them. This was one of the red lines in the negotiations for the Department for Transport to enter into this arrangement, that for very large schemes that approval threshold would apply. However, below that threshold, we have significantly more flexibility than in the absence of the single settlement. So you are right to say that is one of the Department for Transport's conditions of offering the types of flexibilities that they have offered. We have made the similar case to colleagues in the Department for Transport and others, and as you would imagine, there is a balance to be struck in these types of negotiations between what we settle on and then what we do. And I think it was, if looking at the full MOU in the round, we and our leaders and others agree that this is the right type of MOU, not to throw it all away for that particular issue. But you are right, it isn't as far as we would have wanted to go. I think it is not the final MOU. We'll have the opportunity to revisit it. You are right to highlight that, but we did push through the negotiations to try and make sure that did not apply. But we got other things, but unfortunately we didn't get that.
Does anyone else like to speak on the issue? In that case, thank you very much for coming tonight, and thank you for your assistance. Thank you. Item number 7, the medium-term financial strategy. Ian, you leave on this, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The report is in front of members. I'll cut to the chase and move straight to the table under paragraph 30, which summarises the outlook for the next 3 years in the usual format. The lines at the top of the table relate to our spending, and they culminate in a row of figures for total service spend, which are forecast to rise from around 333 million next year to 360 million by 26/7, based on the proposals that are in more detail in the report. I'll take you down the table. There is a series of lines there that relate to the different aspects of our resources, from council tax, from business rates, and from various unring-fenced government grants. Total resources rising from more like 323 million through to 347 million by 26/27. So that means we have a forecast deficit to be funded out of the general fund, excuse me, general fund reserve each year going forward, rising from around 10 million to around 13 million. Our forecast general fund reserve at the end of this current year is 7.6 million. That has significantly reduced in the current year. Our reserves have always been relatively low relative to other authorities, around 19%. If you factor in earmarked reserves as well, around 19% for Dudley, around 55% for the average authority. Every authority is experiencing cost pressures, particularly in the area of social care, but not exclusively. Because our starting level of reserves is relatively low, those problems are becoming difficult for us, hitting us harder and faster than they would an authority with a large level of reserves. So on these figures, there is a forecast for the to have a negative general fund reserve at the end of next year. Now, that is something that can't actually happen. That would be an unlawful position, and as I outline in paragraph 32, based on these numbers, these proposals and these forecasts, the only way that we could set a lawful budget would be to go into our earmarked reserves, which we forecast will be about 12 million, and they're supposed to be earmarked for specific purposes, but we would have to go in and repurpose them in order to set a lawful budget. Now, that position, further work has been going on since this report has been done, and that position has improved a little. We're now in the position where we will actually be able to forecast a small, very small general fund surplus at the end of 24-25, and that will go into the February report and go on to March. But still, and that will not require us to eat into the earmarked reserves at the year end, but it's still an uncomfortably low position. To put in perspective, that good news takes us from a position where you're talking about 3% reserve cover to about 4 or 5% reserve cover. So it is still an extremely uncomfortable position to be in. And the risk is that we experience another year next year of unexpected pressures over and above this budget, and that's an uncomfortably low level of reserves to be holding. And we need to turn that situation round, and we do need as an authority to turn that position round quickly and as far as possible, over and above what's in here and what we've been working on, find further savings that we can deliver as early as possible, wherever possible, early in 24-25, not wait till 25-26, to try to reduce that call on reserves, just to try and keep a reasonably healthy level of reserves at the year end. Ultimately, we need to build those reserves back up to a more reasonable level. That's why this report highlights not that we are in a Section 114 situation, but that there is a significant risk within the next year, something I will have to be monitoring on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis. There is still a significant risk that if things go against us again, we could actually get into that situation, which I'm sure none of us wants to. As such, the report highlights that we're at the highest possible level of risk in relation to the budget. That was all I particularly wanted to say by way of introduction. Happy to take questions on the overall financial context, and directors are here to take questions on the specifics of individual proposals.
Thank you, Ian. Are there any questions from the floor? Councillor Ali?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm sure you'll agree with me that the report before us in terms of the finances doesn't make good reading. It tells a story of the perilous state of the council's finances. And what this report doesn't acknowledge is the mess that's been created in Downing Street, with £122 million of funding that has been cut from Dudley's funding since 2010-11 in real terms. And funding cut at a time when the demand for services was soaring, social services, children's services. And that mess created in Downing Street has been implemented by the Tory council here in Dudley. And why is it that local people should have to pay the price for the Tory failures, financial incompetence, and the mismanagement? Although, just hearing now the Director of Finance, there is a small surplus at the moment, and it will allow potentially to set a legal budget. He, in his words, said it's extremely uncomfortable where this situation is. So that doesn't take us out of the danger. And the deficit this year in paragraph 11 is 15.2 million. It started at 15.2 million, improved to 14.2 million. And then over the next 2 years, the outlook looks grim. I mean, it's a eye-watering £41 million from 25-26, 26-27 in terms of the shortfall and the pressure on budget. So as this is a scrutiny committee, I am going to be asking a number of questions, and obviously, with your permission, I'll come back to some at a later stage. But my first one does relate to the process of disadvantaging the different select or scrutiny committees to be able to scrutinise the budget. And my question is to Councillor Steve Clark: when did he make or take the decision to deprive members on those different select committees to not be able to scrutinise the budgets in detail.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, Councillor Ali, I'll answer your questions in terms of the whole process and the way that we came about the decisions in order for it to be scrutinised. So we, in early September, we had a massive overspend on adult social care and children. So after we then became aware of this, we put into action some spending controls which went through Cabinet, which you were aware of, and you were aware of the overspend at that point of the adults and children's social care. So the spending controls were put in the October Cabinet. We then realised that the spending controls would take months to come into operation, and we then realised that we were going to have to make decisions to reduce some services. We were hoping not to do any. So what I didn't want to do was make those decisions on information that was unavailable. So what we did was we waited for the spending review to happen by the government, and we did not want to make any decisions until we knew what monies were there to spend. So that came through on the 22nd of December, of which at that time we had made sure that you were aware of everything. The leader of your group and deputy leader were sitting in all the meetings to make sure that they're aware of everything going on. When we digested the spending review, that worked out to be about 6.5%, which had already been forecasted in by the 151 officer into the spending. So we felt at that point as though it obviously needed to be scrutinised, and you are the main scrutineer of what's going on here. So you had access to that as from the beginning of January. We have taken it to the scrutiny committees, and this is the first main scrutiny committee. Previous to that, we have gone through a question and answers process with all the members that wanted to attend, so that if anybody had any questions that they weren't sure of, that they could ask the officers and ask ourselves of any decision-making processes which they felt uncomfortable about. And we've gone through that, and everybody seems to be comfortable about the process of scrutiny. And that's it, Councillor Ali. So we acknowledged that there was a problem. Then we worked out a way of dealing with that problem, with that issue, and we are now taking that through the scrutiny here, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Any more questions, Councillor Ali?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think your comments in terms of everyone was comfortable with the scrutiny. I don't think people were comfortable. The question and answer session, we know, had no legal standing, no standing in terms of a formal council committee. And as far as I'm concerned, it was no different to what the political groups do anyway as part of the process. Certainly we in the Labour group we invite the Section 151 officer to come along and give a briefing, and I'm sure the Conservative group do the same. So I think what would be interesting to know, firstly, is was it your decision to say we're not going to have scrutiny committee to kind of look into detail of the budgets, or was it someone else's decision? That's one. The other question I would like to also ask is the recent announcement of additional funding being made available to local authorities. How much is that available to Dudley?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. The 151 officer will take the second part of that question. But as far as the first part, no, we took that as a group to make sure that we got the facts in front of us. What was very important within this process is we needed to know how much money was left. We needed to know how much of our reserves was going to be used in putting together this budget. Without having that information, previously, where we had plenty of reserves, we could take it through far more of a scrutiny process because we knew the reserves would cover it. Now, because of that overspend, we had to make sure, we knew that the possible reserves couldn't cover it. So what we had to do was make sure that we knew what figures we were playing with in the first place. And so we as a group, but obviously I'm the cabinet member for finance, but we as a group decided that we needed to leave it as long as possible until we'd seen that financial settlement from the government, so that therefore we could put our recommendations forward for the budget and then scrutinise them after we knew the exact figures. Thank you.
And then I'll give way to other colleagues to ask questions. I think it still doesn't make sense in terms of your decision-making process in the way you've done it. You've basically deprived the scrutiny committees to do their work, and for the reason they're appointed at the start of the year. Can you tell me how inaccurate was the Section 151 officer's forecast from the government settlement? Because you're saying you're waiting for the settlement and to see, how accurate he was or how out of kilter it would be. And, what made you decide to part from previous, in the way that things have been done previously? Because as far as I think, the budget was forecast was pretty accurate.
Councillor Ali, the forecasting was where it was normally quite pessimistic over the last 5-6 years, where the forecasting has been made, and then we've found we've generally got a little bit more to spend than we've found, and the settlement was normally the settlement is normally a bit better. Unfortunately, well, the 151 officer was bang on with this one, in fact, and so we didn't have any extra wriggle room at all, which we have done in previous years. So his forecasting was bang on, but I am still absolutely convinced that we did the right thing by waiting until we knew what settlement the government had given us before we launched into putting together this budget and then having it scrutinised by yourselves. So I still think that we did exactly the right thing, and his forecasting was bang on. So thank you very much.
Sorry, Councillor Harvey, okay.
Thanks, Chair. Just to come in on the points that Councillor Ali's raised, he's made a big kerfuffle in the press about lack of scrutiny, and yet he's spoken for nearly 14 minutes, asked 3 questions, none of which are scrutinising the budget. He's just asking questions about the scrutiny process. That just about sums up the mentality of the opposition. Now, to cut to the chase, we had the budget summit on December the 22nd. That was the earliest that anyone could reasonably digest what the final settlement was. And even then, the 151 officer and other officers from the finance team came in over the Christmas period to really do the number crunching so it was accurate, to give us options. Those options were presented to the leader and the deputy leader of the opposition. They were given ample opportunity to deliberate, argue, agree or disagree on the scrutiny timetable. There simply isn't the time to do what we traditionally do. That is part, of course, fault of the government who give us our settlement way too late, and that's an issue that I've raised many times before. It should be done in the autumn settlement in October, not the last working week in December. So there wasn't ample opportunity at all. This is the best process we can have, because it was at the Q&A session last week for all council members. All council members have been invited to attend this tonight. And for Councillor Ali to pontificate for 13, 14 minutes, asking 3 questions, not about the detail of the budget proposals, but about the actual scrutiny process. And yet, I look over there, and there's as many officers here tonight as there are Labour Party members. So it clearly doesn't mean that much to your members, does it? You could have whipped them to attend, you could have asked them to attend, but they've not. And the same members who could have attended the other select committees that you harp on about, they could have easily have attended here tonight, but they've chosen not to. So I think if we have less of the posturing from Councillor Ali and just scrutinise the actual budget, you know, we have gone from what could have been an absolute disastrous position in early October, Chair, to one now where we are going to set, on the first Monday in March, a legal budget without dipping in to those earmarked reserves, which, when this report was prepared, could have been a real prospect. We're now in a position where it's not that bad. We can present a budget, not dipping into those earmarked reserves, and with the work that officers and Cabinet will do over the next few months on the total operating model, on the council restructure, I'm confident we will avoid a 114. Thank you, Chair.
Ian?
I'm just conscious that there was a question, I think it was asked, which probably related to an announcement that came out yesterday that might have just got missed in passing. So technically, the announcement that we had from the government the week before Christmas is the provisional local government finance settlement. It's then open to a consultation. Not surprisingly, a number of authorities have been making representations for additional funding. There was an announcement yesterday that the government will add an additional 500 million, which will go to social care authorities. I think there was about another 100 million that relates to authorities that are unlike us, rural authorities, so I didn't really pay much attention to that. But the 500 million, we won't know what our local allocation is until the final local government settlement comes out, which will be the first week of February, and we will take that into account. What we don't know is what conditions come with it or anything. So we'll take that into account when we know exactly what we've got and what we can do with it.
You're right. When it came out yesterday, I looked at the figures at 500-600 million, and straight away divided it by 350 authorities. All right, there's only 19 Mets in there, and we should get a better allocation. But it only came down to just over 1 million and 160, I think. thousand. So it sounds a lot of money, but when you divide it by 350 authorities, it may not mean a lot to us. By all means, Ian.
The 500 million, which is the large part, will only come to social care authorities. So I'd anticipate a bit more than that for Dudley. Perhaps something in the 2 to 3 million range is realistic, but it's the conditions that come attached to it that I don't want to build in too much at this point.
Anyway, Councillor Taylor?
Okay. Moving on from that and asking another question, I'd like to know the fiasco of the household support budget, the response to that, and what plans were made to accommodate residents that didn't have access to internet, and this is hitting the most vulnerable of our residents so bad, and it's causing the situation, survival of the fittest, because at the end of the day, the money that was put aside for this, which is very, very much needed, is nowhere near enough for what we need. And only a very, very few people are actually going to benefit from that household support grant. So can you tell me, 2 questions there, what plans were made to address the people that didn't have access to this grant via the computer, and exactly how many people are we going to be helping?
For that. Right, sorry. So I can't really comment on the overall allocation of the funding because it's the allocation that the local authority receives. But I do appreciate with the level of need out there in the community, it is a small allocation, and so the authority is in the position of trying to do its best with this. The best we can with a small sum of money for this applications-based element of the system, and that is why what we have done is we've opened up the scheme on four time slots during the year, and we are addressing the fact that we need to announce the time slot in advance. Obviously, there are public access IT facilities that people can potentially use, but we are simply up against this problem that the demand massively outstrips, and we can't find a route other than our first come first served basis. We've tried to tweak the allocation criteria during the year. I can't give you the number of people who've had it straight off the top of my head, but I can certainly get that to you as a written answer. And as you'll be aware, through the year, we've tried launching that window at different times of the day because we appreciate some people's circumstances mean middle of the day is really bad. Other people's circumstances mean it's really, the ideal time. So we've tried to spread it through the day. It's an honest attempt by the service to try to do their best with a low allocation of funding. But I'll come back to you with a written answer on the number of awards that we've made. Obviously, we're part way through the allocation on the last part.
Well, I have to say, and I'm sorry to say, but we failed miserably. We have let so many people down. There are so many people out there that are suffering through lack of funds, as all of us are, but we have failed these people. That system was open less than 30 minutes before it shut, and the people that didn't get through no fault of their own, on the first try, didn't get through at all, and that's a massive failure, and I'm sorry, I'll leave it at that. Can I just add on the Household Support Fund? Public Health manages the fund on behalf of the council, and so the vouchers are only one part. There are a number of avenues of accessing, including community groups, DCVS, and the overall managers on behalf of, or the provider on behalf of us, or is a Citizen Advice Bureau. As Ian mentioned, we will get you detailed expenditure and access, who access and through which route. So we have access through adult social care and other frontline services. But it's, as Ian mentioned, demand outstrips the supply. But we are aware the vouchers usually finishes within the first 30 minutes to 1 hour.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points on the scrutiny. I think it was the plan that this budget went to all the scrutiny panels. We moved ours to the beginning of January so we could fit it in. I think what it boils down to is the late settlement figure from government, and Councillor Harley has been very vocal in his annoyance at that, and I think he will continue to do that. And I think we've got a reasonable opportunity tonight. Everybody's been invited to this meeting and can come and air their views on a scrutiny basis. On a particular point in the budget, just on the green bin collections, which I understand the charges, I suppose I'm just going to play a bit of devil's advocate here. I just wonder what the thought process was around the 12-month collections. At the moment, we collect, I can't remember exactly, but we don't do the 12 months. And I question whether during January, February, December, is the service going to be used? Are we going to be sending out crews that we don't need to be sending out? Could we have charged less and charged the residents less and not given them the full 12 months? So just I understand the policy. I agree with the policy. Just asking the question.
Councillor Reid.
Sorry, Nick McGurk wants to respond to that.
No, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to clarify, at the moment, the residents receive 16 collections over a 32-week period. There are those that are paid for the charge service at this moment in time, which you'll be aware of. To be quite frank, in terms of the 12 months or the 25 collections, what we did was we had a look around neighbouring authorities, we had a look around other authorities in the region to see what they were doing. The price that we've put together is one of the lowest across the region. Also, it offers the best value for money in terms of those collections, and 25 of them across the year. There are people that do use the service throughout, as you're referring to, the winter months, and I think we don't want to disadvantage people throughout those months as well. We will be reviewing that as well, so we can have a look and see if we can review, but it's certainly, we don't feel there'd be a waste of time for people collecting that based on the information that we've gathered over the last several years of collections.
The exposure to the lowest paid and prevent homelessness.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So obviously we're very mindful of increasing costs across the board. So there's a number of options that are in place. As you'll know, we have a very good homelessness service. Their prevention levels are incredibly high through the work that they do, and we thankfully don't have many people who have a full homeless duty because we've been able to prevent in most cases. There are a number of different sources that we'll refer people to. So we've got things like DHPs, we'll support people with those. Our income officers in particular do a lot of work to maximise income and benefits and to bring money back to households that perhaps they've either not been claiming or perhaps where they've overpaid for something. We've got an officer, I think, brought in across the number of customers that they were working with, the equivalent of £22,000 in the last couple of months in terms of maximising income. So we've got that. We've got the DHP fund. We've got things like the Household Support Fund and others where we can refer to them. And they also have very strong links with our partner agencies like Citizens Advice, etc., food banks, where we can refer people to. So there's a range of support for those people who need it. Probably, you know, that it will vary on their financial circumstances. And in terms of homelessness, we've got a strong prevention team. In terms of housing need, our rents are low, even for social housing, and below the local housing allowance. Obviously, our concern is for people who are private renting, where we have no control over the rents, and we'll look to support them in terms of financial advice and benefits and income maximisation where we can.
Third time lucky. As you know, Kathy, I'm on the front line and I work with these vulnerable people, the poverty that I see daily. And now with the rises that you're suggesting, I don't know how we are going to prevent the homelessness, because we've got working class people who come under the threshold of the benefits, who are trying to work, but will not be able to afford those 4 rises you are prepared to put in place come April. And we're going to see a lot more of the homeless people, more food banks, more poverty. You say that these things are in place, Citizens Advice Bureau and everything. It's so strange that they come to me, I'm only a little organisation, and people who are working, it's heartbreaking that they come for a food voucher. It's either eat or pay the electric and gas. It's either eat or pay the rent. How are we're going backwards, we're not going forwards.
Kathy, are you going to answer that, are you?
Yes, I'm on now. I'm switched back on. Apologies for the delay. I still haven't got the hang of these. You're absolutely right. And what we need to do is we have to balance what we need to do to balance our budgets effectively, and then understand the impact of that on customers and what we can put into place to support. What we can't do is not set a balanced budget on the basis that we've got concerns about what actually, from a housing perspective, is around 30% of our customers who we think may be impacted more by this than the other 70% who will get the financial support that they need to cover any increase. So what we need to do is set a balanced budget and then focus on continuously looking at the ways we can support that 30% who may need the help. So we'll look at all the funds and the advice and the support that's already in place. We're also looking at potentially some discretionary funds as a transition period as we go through the next year, but we can't not set a balanced budget on the basis that we've got concerns around those. We need to focus on how we support those who are vulnerable.
Our concern, though, is not just one rise you're giving these clients, you're giving them 4 rises, and those in high-rise flats and low-rise flats. Instead of introducing the service charge gradually, you're going to go and give them a service charge of £12.46 weekly on top of a rent rise, a council tax rise, a home care rise, and green waste. How on earth is the working class going to pay that? 5 rises?
Just wait for the mic to switch. There we are. Obviously, it's important to look at these things in context, and here we are in the Black Country in the West Midlands, and of course the best way to look at it in context for Dudley Borough is to compare with our neighbouring authorities. And so with directors and officers, senior officers here tonight, I was just wondering if we could have a few points of clarification in terms of the increases that we're talking about. My understanding is that with the proposed increase in council tax, we will still remain the lowest paying council tax in the borough, in the West Midlands, as I understand it, certainly lower Then for our colleagues opposite, Labour-run Sandwell, Labour-run Wolverhampton, and very much so Labour-run Birmingham, which we know is in significant difficulty, more than any other in the region. And then when we talk about rent increases, obviously we do need to be mindful of the impact that rent increases have on our local tenants. But at the same time, we've got to protect the services that those tenants have and receive. And we've actually spoke a lot this year about how we want to improve those services for our tenants. So with the Director of Housing, can we confirm how our increase compares to the increase that other authorities around the region will be facing? Because as far as I'm concerned, we need to protect services. We want to look at what other authorities are doing locally and make sure we're not overcharging our residents and our tenants in comparison. So it's important to look at these things in context. And if the officers could confirm, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, shall I come in there, Chair? Yeah, I can confirm that as far as I'm aware, I've not come across any housing provider, either locally or more widely at the moment, who isn't applying the full rent increase that's allowed under the rent standard. It's coming from a basis of having several years of rent decreases, which has impacted on budgets as well as increasing costs. So to be able to deliver services in the way that Councillor Davis has described, we have to ensure that we've got the budget there to do that. So we are a low rent authority, even with the rent increases compared to our neighbours. As I'd said, we're below local housing allowance rate for our homes, so they are relatively low in terms of rents comparatively. Nevertheless, I appreciate it doesn't feel like that when you're paying it. I think more widely, we're also the only housing provider I know who doesn't service charge. So this is a charge for services that are legitimately received. And again, I appreciate that bringing it in will be a challenge for people, and that's why we're looking at whether there are any discretionary transition funds we can put in place to support those who are genuinely struggling, and how we can deliver that. But we cannot not charge for services that we're providing if we're to be able to continue to deliver and improve our services and actually manage our homes for our customers.
Mr. Newman or Ian?
Just to put the numbers in on council tax, council tax is around 10% lower than the average for a metropolitan authority. It's certainly the lowest in the West Midlands. From exchanges between people who do my job around the country, I'm not aware of any authority that's planning to put in less than a 4.9% increase. We're putting 4. Nearly everybody is planning a 4.99, a small number, 4.95, 4.9, just to be different. But what that means is we'll all move up, but we'll all move up in parallel, and we'll still be 10% behind. A small number of authorities are being given freedom to put up their council tax considerably more than that, so a small number will be able to go up by 10%.
So my question's about equality impact assessments, which are covered on pages 65 and 66. So paragraph 3 makes reference to equality impact assessments being available at some point. My question would be, when are they going to be available? Because normally at this stage in the budget setting cycle, we'll have been having scrutiny committees with equality impact assessments attached, which go into the detail of how, for example, the very good examples that Councillor Reid gave, of what the adverse impact that decisions can have and how much those are going to cost to keep people actually in a home. Because without doing an equality impact assessment, there may be additional costs arising from the consequences of making those budgetary decisions. And I'm concerned that we haven't got this information here at this final meeting before the budget setting meeting itself. So my question then is, if we are going to get, if we're going to have reported to us the equality impact of these decisions, which in writing here are saying are going to be considerable, what is that process of examination and scrutiny going to look like in respect of that information?
I don't know whether anyone else want to come in at any more detail on some of the specific areas where equality impact assessments are being done, but the normal process is the equality impact assessments are being worked on in parallel with the scrutiny process and the consultation process, because they are informed by the opinions of people who respond to consultation on the specific savings. We normally make them the normal process is we make them available at the February cabinet meeting, and obviously available in March as well. And there is no intention to change that process this year.
Good practice in this this area of business is actually to have some equality impact assessments done to help you inform and shape the proposals that you make. So good, although you're saying that this is left to the consultation process, there's actually nothing, given that you're already aware of the significant impact these decisions are going to have, there has been nothing to stop the council actually consulting with certain groups ahead of the consultation formally starting. There's been nothing at all to stop the council actually doing that, and that would be good practice, particularly in regard to the exceptional circumstances that are going to face the public, and in particular the sort of groups and residents that Councillor Reid has referred to in her example.
To be fair, the exceptional circumstances have been the tight time frame. We have an awful lot to do in the time available, and really allowing for holidays. We're here within about 3 weeks on a major budgetary decision and a major scrutiny of the budget. But in reality, think of how many days have actually been worked in the last 3 weeks. We have the time frame has been terribly tight.
Having said that, special spending measures were introduced October, and some work could have started there. We knew, the council knew where it was potentially heading in terms of some of the decisions that it would have to make, and was considering them at that stage.
Elvinda?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Foster. So, as you will have heard from Cathy Jones, she talked about the percentage difference and the focus on the 30%. So that there has been work to assess the impact that's been ongoing as these proposals have worked up. Mr. Boucher's team have assessed the impact on the changes proposed around the Unicorn Centre and how those the users of that service will be reallocated. So that work has been done all through the process to consider the impact. And as Ian has said, that will be made available in February after the budget consultation process has informed it further, and then again at the council meeting. That's why we're able to set out the percentages of people that we believe will be impacted and the additional support and guidance that we'll give them in terms of signposting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid?
Yeah, going back to it. Basically, I think what we're going to see in the future with the 4-5 rises that they've put in place is you're going to see a lot go through mental health, homelessness. So as a council, I hope we are prepared to pick that up. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Chair. Just sort of listening to what Ian has said, the sort of money coming in from the government, and obviously not, it's all at early stages, but listening to the debate and so on, I've kind of formalised 3 questions which are very much aimed for Matt Boucher for adult and social care. What I'll do is I'll lump these together, Matt, so you can respond, okay? So is the proposed adult social care budget sufficient to meet our regulatory requirements? Question number 1. And number 2, are there any anticipated care home closures in the borough which may worsen the council's financial position? Question number 2. Question number 3 is the inflationary award which has been factored in sufficient to meet national living wage requirements? Okay.
Thanks, Councillor Neath. So let me take the home closures question first. At this juncture, there are no known imminent residential or nursing home closures in the older people's market in Dudley. We have seen, as you'll be aware through the Select Committee, a range of closures in the preceding 12 months. As a consequence of that, there is money woven into the budget build to look at a new care bandings model that attempts to secure more capacity in the market and make sure that our local businesses are appropriately supported. They're not inconsiderable sums. We've got a hypothecated 7% inflation for all care provision across the board, whether that is a direct payment, domiciliary care provision, supported living, residential care provision. I do note that ADAS West Midlands have recommended 8%. I think in the financial context that the council is in, there is a significant growth built into the budget as it stands. We are just about keeping pace with the way that the market's moving. I can't give assurance there will be 0 care failures in the next 12 months. What I can say is the commissioning team will certainly work closely with all our care providers to prevent that from happening wherever possible. There is pressure on the budget as we move into next year, assuming that these numbers are approved, and my management team is actively working on reducing those pressures now, so we start assuming the budget goes ahead as planned on a 0 balance figure. So certainly everybody in the management team and the cabinet member are very mindful of the impact that this significant growth is having on the overall health of the council. I don't feel that the pressures demonstrated here are inconsistent with any other top tier local authority with social care responsibilities, and in line with the fact that we are a low tax and a low council tax authority who have historically relatively and comparatively lower rates of pay to our care providers. I think this is the best we can do in a difficult and challenging circumstance. And what we now have to do is keep a very close eye on inflation. A point I've made on record in the Select Committee and would reiterate tonight is whilst it is absolutely right and proper that government continues to improve terms and conditions for our care workers, irrespective of who employs them, any rise in the national minimum wage must be commensurate with the level of funding that goes into grants at local government level. Otherwise, it's a cost pressure, and that cost pressure comes from reserves that are fast declining and running out. Hopefully that's answered all your questions.
John, by all means.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for extending the invitation to all members of the council to attend this very important meeting. Thank you. And could I ask, well, could I direct a question to the Finance Director to start with, Chair? These figures, I'm shocked and worried. Am I right to be?
As I said at the beginning, it's extremely uncomfortable. Yeah, it is a worrying position.
Can I ask the Director of Adult Social Care, when did you notice the overspend of £7.6 million in the adult social care budget?
The overspend of 7.6 million refers to the position that we were in the October outturn. The fact that pressure was building started consistently from May onwards, but there was a major spike when we got to the August outturn and a further significant jump in September. So roughly around mid to late August was when we first saw the numbers getting seriously out of control. Two primary factors that drove that. The first is that we have some 538 additional people receiving formal care and support this financial year compared to the preceding period. And that, I think, is directly linked to catching up with the number of people who needed support post-pandemic. And the second is the impact and continued impact of inflation on the care market. And I've just referred to some of that in my previous response.
Any more, John? Okay.
Can I just follow up on that? When did you bring this to the attention of Cabinet and the Finance Director, and could you have brought it to their attention any earlier?
So in terms of the scale of the pressure that you referred to in your original question, the scale of that pressure wasn't known until October. However, the fact that there was a building pressure was reported sequentially through the usual financial processes. Certainly at the start of the financial year, I informally briefed Cabinet about concerns about the residential and nursing care market, though at that juncture, the scale and volume of market failure was not apparent. And it is fair to say that the impact on care fees that we saw outstripped even my expectations at that time. So I feel that the financial processes operated as they ordinarily would do. It is fair to say that the team were doing everything they could to try and mitigate that as far as is practicable, but we have seen unprecedented growth in demand for care and the cost of providing that care. So I don't think there is anything major that was missed from my perspective. But the real leap in the tail, if you look at the outturn data, is that period going towards the back end of August, right the way through to October, when that overspend firstly doubled and then trebled. That was when it really started to lift off. And in terms of financial reporting, there's always a lag then in terms of when that's reflected in the numbers, as all the invoices are collated for care, as all the numbers are worked through.
Ian, when did you become first aware of a £7.6 million overspend in adults and a £4.7 million overspend in children's?
The report that went to Cabinet in July, which was primarily dealing with the outturn for the previous financial year, recognised at that point an 8 million overall deficit for the year, and recognised verbally that there were emerging pressures on adults and children's. So we knew that there was a pressure on adults and children's, and we highlighted that. At that point, it was a fast-moving position in terms of the way the care market was moving, and the numbers were moving faster than I've experienced before. So we knew that there was a pressure. We said and we reported that there was a pressure. What we didn't do was to fix that figure, but by the time we got to the middle of the year, it was clear that the pressure was in the sort of range that you're describing there, and we reported it as a number, but we highlighted it as an issue in the report before that.
Bearing in mind the auditors have criticised the council's longer-term financial planning, it seems to me that we have quite an acute problem with our in-year financial processes as well, if we can be hit by such large overspends in the middle of the financial year. So either there's something drastically wrong with our internal processes that we can suddenly in October become aware of such huge overspends, or we've got people within that process not doing their jobs properly. So where is the blockage? Where is the problem? We've heard from the Finance Director that we became aware of it, but we failed to fix it. So I'd like to ask the Finance Director, bearing in mind what you've just told me and what the auditors have been saying, how do we go about fixing it so that we're not in this situation going forward.
There, in particular, in an area like adult social care and children's social care, there's a difference between being aware of it and fixing it. There's a statutory duty to provide social care in certain circumstances, and the officers over there, the people who fulfil that statutory duty. Prices in the market have moved faster in this year than we've experienced them before. So if there was an issue, there was an issue with reporting it, but we were recognising that there was a problem. We were reporting, we were highlighting from the point of view of drawing attention to the organisation. There's a pressure coming up here that we will need to address through the council's overall financial position. I don't think the outcomes would have been different if we had put a guesswork figure in the report in July, which with the benefit of hindsight we might have done. I don't think the outcomes would have been different because Matt and Catherine still need to provide social care to people who require social care, and the market is making the cost of that very, very, very tight. But for future years, I think we will be putting that guesswork figure in sooner, taking a fly. You know, early in the year, when something is moving fast, and this is particularly complex because it's a number. Some of these costs, some of these individual care placements are particularly significant costs. So it is volatile. It is harder to monitor than other things.
She wanted to come in also.
Important, bearing in mind we pay a lot of money to the local authorities' auditors, who every year seem to come back with us and criticise our long-term financial planning. Now, overspends in adults and children's are not new, but we seem to be hit with these overspends quite frequently. So we must fix this problem going forward. And if we need additional capacity or expertise to do that, then this local authority needs to consider that very, very carefully. Chair, I have got another question for the Housing Director. Would you like me to ask that now or later on?
By all means, while you're there, John.
Thank you, Chair. Question to the Housing Director. Why, during a cost of living crisis, are we banking reserves in the housing revenue account to the tune of £4 million next year and another £4 million the year afterwards? Why is the council building up £10 million cash in the bank from council tenants instead of improving services with that money, or better still, leaving it in tenants' pockets?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so in terms of our reserves for the housing revenue accounts, they are much lower than any comparable local authorities. And what that does is put us in a position where, should we need to respond to something that is costly and that cannot be avoided, we would not be in the position to do that. So we know that we've got investment required in our homes. We will know the level of the investment required within the next couple of months when we complete our stock condition surveys. That will help us to reset our investment strategy and actually what we spend over the next 5, 10, 15 years on our homes. What we don't know, more importantly, is the costs of what might be coming. So we know that currently, as part of our stock condition work, we look at the compliance of our homes with what's called the Decent Homes Standard. We know that Decent Homes 2 is coming. We don't know what's in it, but we know it's likely to be more stringent. So we've got to take what we think we may have to spend on our homes when we get that kind of final detail of 100% towards the end of this financial year, and then be in a position to be able to respond over and above that when Decent Homes 2 comes in. We've got the issues that are not unique to housing, either in Dudley or in terms of housing services, around increasing costs, increasing labour, etc. We cannot be in a position where we've not got enough money in our reserves to be able to respond appropriately to what we know is coming in terms of regulatory compliance, decent home standards, etc.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, could I just, Mr Bowsher wanted to finish off the response to Councillor Martin around social care.
Yeah, thank you. So 2 points. I think I would echo the Treasurer's sentiment, given clearly we have lower reserves, less financial resilience in terms of future surprises. If there is anything that we can do to sharpen in year forecasting, we need to do it. I accept that. To contextualise the position, and I note in your comments you said consistent overspending in adult social care. That wasn't true of the preceding financial year or the financial year before that, where we ended on balance as we did the financial year before that. So this is an exceptional year as far as outturn is concerned from an adult social care perspective. It is, however, a very consistent picture across both the region and the rest of the country, with a significant majority of the 152 councils with top-tier responsibilities forecasting significant overspends for the 2 reasons I mentioned, rising care costs and demand for care. And in this region alone, overspending ranges between 4% of net budget right the way up to 16% of net budget. And the Dudley position is somewhere around the 7% mark as we stand. Nobody's celebrating that. Given the context we're moving forwards, we don't have margins like that to work with, which means every penny will have to be scrutinised and challenged very robustly. But what I do want to say to this committee as the statutory director is, I do not believe a single penny of the money that was spent meeting the needs of that additional 538 people was illegal, unlawful or unnecessary. It was in line with our duties under the Care Act and under the Mental Health Act. And I've been fully transparent with the Select Committee about all of the data that demonstrates the performance and the steps we've taken to make sure people aren't waiting for a lengthy period of time for a service they're entitled to.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to make an observation first, Chair, and then ask a question, or it'll be another observation probably. A couple of things have been said tonight about other councils and comparing us with them. Dudley Council cannot be compared with other authorities in the area. We are a totally different council. We are a bellwether council, and both parties are totally guilty on this, making political decisions rather than the decisions that are right for people. Councillor Hodges just nodded to him. I'll remind him of the debate in 2017. If my proposal for waste collection had gone through, you wouldn't have to be charged now for green waste. And that's you're in charge anyway. No, I don't think we would. But anyway, it's a bogus argument comparing us with everybody else and saying, oh, we're not putting it up, because we're dealing with a population that has lived with low taxation and fewer services. We cannot get away from that. So you can't compare us with others. And if I could, I just would like to bang the political parties' heads together and say, we shouldn't be making politics out of this. We should be thinking of the people of Dudley. And that's the truth. And when I look back, I've been here since 2012, and I found it very difficult because we do make decisions sometimes, and they are purely political, Chair, and we know that. But to come to my question, the one that really worries me, I mean, I've been setting budgets now since 1992 with local management of schools. Started off with a sheet of paper and writing the head teacher's salary and all that. But, and I've gone on, I've been the president of my union, I'm still a trustee of my trade union, and I'll be there in a couple of weeks looking at a budget of around 30 million. But who will I be listening to? I'd love to say I'll be looking at the figures. I'll be listening to the auditors. I've served on Birmingham Airport Board. I was there for 5 years. Who did we listen to? We listened to our auditors. I served 11 years on the exam board, which was a charity, cash. All the paraprofessionals you find out there have all got cash qualifications. Who did we listen to? We listened to our auditors. And as a head teacher, sometimes I wanted to do things like, oh, I'd like to resurface the in early years playground, or I'd like to do this. And the budget officer would say, awfully sorry, Hilary, but you just haven't got the money this year. So I want to know, really, when the auditors and others are advising the current leadership what they should do to make the budget work. Why, in January the 11th at the Cabinet meeting, there were 2 proposals and they were rejected. And I just want to know, why were you not listening to your auditors? Because that's something I've always done. And if the auditors then say, they want to make suggesting that you do a cut or you don't do something, then you should then turn to the auditors and say, all right, then what else do I do in place of that? That may be what you've done. I don't know. But it really does worry me. And I'm just going to go back to it again. If I ever do get my bottom on that chair up there, I will constantly say to everybody in the council chamber, you are not here to play politics. You are here to serve the people of Dudley.
I can guess what one is, but if you just clarify what the 2 issues were.
But there were 2. I don't know. It's your report.
just prompt. But through you, Chair, I'll talk on Pens Meadow. Anyone that has visited that site will recognise that we need to do something and do something drastically. And this was a decision taken probably about 18 months ago. Gone through Cabinet, gone through informal Cabinet, gone through Cabinet. We've scrutinised this, we've worked really hard, Councillor Clark, myself, Councillor Buttery, and the officers to try and find other ways to fund this. Private sector, charitable endeavours from people across the borough with deep pockets, not succeeded. So cheap form of borrowing is to do for the local authority to do it itself. If we delay, then we are kidding ourselves, because with construction inflation, any saving on that bottom line in that budget, in that Cabinet report, is swallowed up by construction inflation. So ultimately, it will cost us more. So the decision, let's be straight with each other, would not be to stall it for 2 or 3 years. It would be, it's not going to happen. And I don't think as members we can do that to those children, to the parents, to the governors, mostly to the kids and the staff. When I visited that school, probably about 12 months ago, and I said, look, I think we're almost over the line, the lady on the front desk burst into tears. She hadn't got kids there anymore, but she'd had children go to that school, and she burst into tears. That's how much it means to them. That's politicians doing something right, and probably not listening to the auditors, and perhaps in the past we should have done, particularly when 2 administrations froze council tax for 5 years in succession. 2 years on this side, 3 years on that side. And I bet those leaders at the time probably don't, but I certainly wish we could take the clock back and not take that grant. Because though it was politically good for each party, it's why we're £15 million less than the average authority in the Black Country now. So hopefully lessons learned. And I think across the political divide, I think we acknowledge that council tax has to go up, and we can't play politics on that issue. But Pens Meadow, one, I can justify it as leader by saying with the construction inflation, any saving would just be dwarfed by the increase in construction costs. And local authorities are at the mercy of developers and builders who just add a few noughts on the end. So if we get a deal over the line where we know what that figure is, that's the figure we're paying. Second point I would say through you, Chair, there are some private sector providers that we don't have a choice where some of these children go. It's a decision of a judge where parents, quite rightly in their opinion, have fought and fought and fought to get their child the best place they can have. The best surroundings, the best education, the best respite sometimes. But it's expensive. Doesn't mean it's better than what this authority provides. And I believe the new Pens Meadow will provide first-class facilities, brand new, state-of-the-art, with a hydro pool that could be a source of revenue in future, and actually generate income. But it will provide those facilities that currently this authority can't provide, and therefore parents are fighting really hard through the courts and through the judges to get it through private provision in the borough or out the borough, or the local authority provision but outside the borough. The average private provider in this authority for a high needs child ranges from £60,000 a year, high needs, to £90,000 a year, Chair. The average high needs cost for a child at the current Pensmeadow site is £31,000 a year. Now, to be fair to the Section 151 officer, he cannot present a column in the budget that says this might happen. But we know that when that school is built, it will probably be oversubscribed because it's new and brand new and all the modern equipment and kit, etc. And we will probably have, and the director will probably have issues with trying to say no to parents who want to get their kids in that school. At that point, that school starts paying for itself. Because I will predict, I will stick my neck out that parents will not be fighting to take their children to a private provision where, yes, it's costly, but the level of care and provision is nowhere near what this authority and our teachers employed by this borough can provide. And Councillor Bills, I put my heart on my sleeve on this because it's a very personal project. I visited the school, and I believe every 72 members in this authority owes it to that, not the children that are there today. It will be the children of tomorrow that go there, the SEND kids of tomorrow, and we owe it to those kids. And that's why I think we've made the right decision. It doesn't mean that we don't listen to the auditors in future, and I think sometimes both parties have probably thought, oh, we'll be okay this year. I think this exercise, the last few months, has certainly taught myself and my cabinet that we have to have a totally new operating model, a new restructure, and one that genuinely provides a different council and one that can stand on its own 2 feet financially. Thank you. I nearly said Mr. Mayor then.
Thank you, Councillor
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
There you go. Well, thank you for that. I mean, you know, as an educationist, I wouldn't argue. But if the school was that desperate, could we not attract government funding? I mean, I just don't see why it's just us. And yes, we do need to. We need to grow up in this council chamber and stop the. I'm not saying we stop the politics because that make me meetings boring, take the fun out of it. But when we do challenge each other and we really have to think of the impact of what we're doing, because it's the generation of councillors down the line in Dudley, because we're a bellwether. You never quite know who's going to be in power, do you? Let's face it, in the People's Republic of Sandwell, you know who's going to be in power. They can make plans for years and years and they know they're going to be there. Whereas in this borough, we all know what it's been like. I can't remember what the other thing is. But I'm just going to say, if we're going to do the pens, can I just put a plea in for Halesbury Special School, please? Because I've been a governor there since 2012, and we've gone from 70 children to 171. I don't quite know where we're supposed to put them. We're housing them at the moment in the caretaker's property, which we've made into for the children post 16. But you know, in the process, if you're that passionate about special needs, you can come and visit me there. Okay.
The Councillor Bills raised. We tried everything, Hillary. We tried members of Parliament, we tried private sector organisations, we tried every contact we could, and that's why we've ended up funding it ourselves. And on that point, I am confident that we will still retain control in May, and I would say that would not. I am confident. However, I make this plea to whoever is running this council after May, when that school opens in 25, 26, that the person who cuts the ribbon is the long-suffering head teacher, not a minister who didn't give us the money, not an MP, the long-suffering head who I hope will stay on until that school reopens and then she can happily retire.
Thank you. I think we've had. I do apologise, David.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mine is just a brief comment after listening to the debate. One of the people I really feel sorry for in this room tonight is Matt Boucher. He's got probably the most difficult job of all the directors with the type of budget, and taking into account, quite seriously, the ageing population of this borough and what we've got to forecast what's going to happen in the future and what the needs will be is a very, very difficult task. So we must give all the support and help we can to Mr Boucher. He's running his directorate where there's a lot of decisions to be made, but also bear in mind, for goodness sake, the ageing population and how difficult it is to judge any budget at all when you're dealing with an unknown quantity. Thank you.
There's a lot of truth there, Councillor, there's no doubt about it. Thank you. I think we've had a full and frank discussion. This kind of meeting can be improved and will be improved. I'd like to have seen a greater turnout from both sides, but in all fairness, with a little more improvement to this meeting, I cannot see any reason to duplicate it 10 times like we have done in the past. And briefings can be given to councillors before and after and in writing, and bring them up to scratch and make them fully informed. But tonight has proved a point on the two big issues tonight that this can work, and we do not need to duplicate it 10 times.
Councillor Ali wants to come.
I do apologise, Councillor Ali.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions, if you don't mind. I did say that I will come back. I mean, Councillor Martin's asked some pertinent questions in terms of the directors. And yeah, I think the problem with Councillor Harley is, you know, he's in a hurry to go back to his pub and have a pint. And that's how serious he takes the scrutiny process. You know, kind of rubbishes everything, doesn't want to listen to anyone. So no, I think
from Councillor Raleigh, that's all that's done is send members to sleep.
With Councillor Harley, and this is why this council is where it is, because he doesn't listen to anyone. And when you scrutinise, when you challenge, he closes his ears and then goes to sleep. The problem is that's why this council is in such a mess, and they can't run away from their failures. And as I was saying, Chair, Councillor Martin asked some pertinent questions of the officers. And recently there seems to be this trend. Any kind of failure is the officer's fault. And the Tory administration doesn't want to take responsibility for any of those. And one of those, going back to the audit committee, and they say, you know, that audit committee report came in July last year. And Councillor Harley said alarm bells were ringing, but they did not take any action. They sat on their hands. We raised the issues in the audit committee, my colleagues and I, on a number of occasions, and an email was sent by the chair of the committee to Councillor Steve Clark. I'd be really helpful for us to let us know what was in that email and what was his response to that email.
Councillor Clark, do you want to come forward?
Which email was it? Which email are you talking about?
Angus Lees, the chair of audit committee, sent you an email following an audit committee where we discussed the auditor's report. So he brought our concerns to your attention on our behalf. So it'd be really helpful if you can tell us what that email said and what your response was to him.
Yes, I accept that. We did have an email. It was from that committee, and it was from Angus Lees, warning us that the committee, the audit committee, the audit group, Grant Thornton, had risks, had challenges, and they actually put those forward. And I did acknowledge that those were noted.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, that is not the response that an audit committee needs, noted. Noted in terms of what no action was taken, and then all we've heard of all the timescales. Oh, we waited till October, till November, till December. So it, shows your incompetence, your failures of acting on external advice, independent advice, which were staring you right in the eye, saying there is a problem heading to this council, and you sat on your hands and never did anything. And can I also say, Chair, in that report, the external auditors said that factors such as pay award, business rates, lack of general price inflation, changes in borrowing rates weren't considered. And their estimate in that report said that a 1% increase in any of these areas would contribute an additional £9 million to the council's revenue costs. So can Councillor Clark tell us if he's taken all those factors into consideration and we are not looking at the same situation as last year?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Rather than scrutinising what's going on in here, you're again being just political again. What's happened is that we have had a problem with adult social care where they have overspent. We've identified that problem. We've looked at what we can do about that problem, and we are putting together a budget to make sure that it is a legal budget for this year, for this March. We're doing the right thing. We've had a problem, we're addressing it. We have a low council tax, we have low reserves, and to just be political about it is just... Councillor Martin's questions were the most valid of the night.
Councillor Harley?
I'm
sorry.
Absolutely. So, and they were superb. They were super. Well, your questions on Penns Meadow, absolutely fabulous questions, but this is just being political. I'm sorry, Chair, this is just ridiculous.
Councillor Harley?
Thanks, Chair. You have a clear example here of opposition for opposition's sake. You've had some good scrutiny questions asked tonight from several members, including our colleague on the back row. Real good scrutiny. And then you've had absolute nonsense and huffing and puffing from Councillor Ali. He leads the finance brief for the Labour group and should be setting an example like Councillor Bills Martin and our colleague at the back have done, and he hasn't. It's really clear that if Councillor Ali was in charge of Dudley's finances, the libraries would have had a restructure last year. We'd have probably lost 2/3 of them. It's clear that he would go further than what Councillor Clark has gone this year and reduce roads maintenance budget, close more libraries, do more savage cuts to adult social care, not proceed with the building of Penns Meadow. And yes, that would make good reading from the external auditor. But it would salami slice services. And I think what that would do to the workforce and to these directors who've worked their socks off to turn this budget round from where it was in October, where we now have a legal budget to present to full council on March the 4th. A legal budget that doesn't dip into those reserves that Ian thought he would have to do when he wrote this report. So that is progress. But what we're also doing, this administration, is tasking all the officers, from the Chief Exec, Deputy Chief Exec, and all the directors behind us, to work in their own briefs and do cross-divisional work on getting that new total operating model for this authority. That is what will put our finances firmly in the black, allow us to have good report back from the external auditor in the future, still provide services to the people of this borough, but do it in a way which is measured and timely and one where we are not just savagely cutting away at services. We are reorganising them, we're having a reshape, we're having a new operating model, and there will be some things that we do now that perhaps we won't do in the future, and we won't know what those are yet until the officer team presents them to Cabinet. But things will be different, but it will put us on a sound financial footing. I think that measured approach, and we have a bit of breathing space now because we will present, as I said, a balanced budget, a legal budget, without dipping into the ring-fence reserves. That is progress, but it allows us time for the officer team to come back and present to Cabinet, and indeed to the wider, or all 72 members, a new operating model which helps us avoid a 114 and helps us avoid falling into the same trap that other authorities like Birmingham, like Nottingham, who had the same warnings we had several years ago, didn't heed them. This administration is heeding those warnings and we are doing something about it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harley. Right, let's move on to... sorry.
Just to come back and say I disagree with the comments Councillor Harley's made in terms of libraries. It was his administration who put the libraries at risk, and it was people power and pressure from this side which got those libraries back. So I think don't tell us, and I think the people and the public out there are not fooled by your comments. And just to finish off, I think the future of Dudley is at risk at this at the hands of this Tory administration. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ali. With that, let's move on to item number 8, the interim progress report, the independent assurance board presentation by the Deputy Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. So next slide, please, Steve. Next one. So these slides were circulated in advance and were put on the system. But again, taking on board the comments, we will ensure that even presentations take into account the accessibility needs. So I'll take that improvement away. Scrutiny Committee asked if I could bring back an update on what is our overall improvements and sustainability programme. So you've heard Councillor Harley talk about the target operating model. That is a big part of this piece of work that we, as a whole organisation, are embarking on. So the overall plan that we've put together has 3 phases. The first one is mobilising, so getting everything ready to start the transition towards transforming our council with a new organisational review and a target operating model, looking at the savings we need to make, and you can see in the Cabinet papers the key projects this year that the officers are going to deliver that will help reduce the budget overspend that we've got. And then phases 2 and 3 are where we start to move into when we call fit for purpose. That is prioritising the services that we're delivering, targeting them, and being clear with our engagement about where service levels will change in light of the council's financial position. So that is about communicating with our residents and making sure that they fully understand. But it's also, taking a hard look so that we can present options back to members about options for service delivery. Do we still deliver them in-house, or do we look at different models of delivery? And then the final phase is transformation. So, our new target operating model, and starting to look at how we use digital better and really sweat our assets, our buildings, and our other tools that we've got at our disposal to really focus on customer services and living within our means, but automating areas where possible. What I propose to do is, at future scrutinies, is bring a milestone update on the actual. So I'm telling you today the what. Going through, I'll be able to say how we're doing that, what that's delivering, the savings, the customer services improvements, etc., and the different performance indicators that we're putting in place so that everybody's clear on the levels of service they will get. Next slide. So the question was asked at scrutiny, so how does everything now knit together? So we've got a series of governance arrangements. After the independent peer review, the council voluntarily asked for the Local Government Association to come in and oversee our improvement journey. There was two reasons for that. One is that we've got experts from across the country and the LGA who are able to help us and give us guidance on where others have delivered best practice so that we can learn from that quickly. But the second thing as well is that the LGA have at their resources other support that they can give us as we look at specific areas that we can bring in that expertise. So the improvement board is in place. It's met now 3 times and it's looking at key things. It's fair to say that their first few meetings have been focused on the budget, as you would expect. We have the next meeting on Monday. That is again largely on the budget, so they'll understand the current position. They are being very challenging in terms of how we're going to replenish reserves, as you would expect. But they're also helping us to, steer our way through with that extra additional expertise that comes with LGA support. We've set up an internal delivery group, which is primarily made up of the directors and the strategic exec board members. That delivery group is the group that is steering this improvement plan. They are focused on the new target operating model, driving out the savings, and then various other groups have been established. So, for example, in environment, Nick has a transformation board, which is looking at the projects such as, future for waste and recycling, future for parking, and then Helen's got transformation in terms of leisure, the future of our borough halls and some of our sort of catering facilities. Those are just a few of the projects that the internal delivery group is looking at, because as Ian said earlier, the earliest we can deliver the savings in 2024, rather than wait till the next financial year, the sooner we can start to deliver them, the sooner that we can see the level of our reserves and other things that we've got to do. And then those 2 boards report through to the Cabinet so that they can see what are the performance arrangements and progress. And of course, you've got the Strategic Exec Board, which is the internal delivery group is a component, but the Strategic Exec Board has also got oversight of the improvement programme. So that's the governance that we've got in place. So if you could put the next slide. This is just a diagram to show you all the different governance arrangements. We've got our external auditors who are also keeping an eye on how the work on our improvement plan's going, and the external board that I've talked about. So this is in your slides pack. It's just an aide-memoire for you that when I bring milestone updates, you can see, depending on what programme we bring back, what route it will take through governance. Some of the projects we're bringing back will definitely go through full council because of the size of them, but that's the bit we're focused on. And I'm the directors, heads of service, assistant directors and service directors, and all our workforce are focused on the improvement journey that we know as a council we've got to take. Next slide, Steve. And then this one I'm not proposing to go through, but this is just the terms of reference for the improvement board that they've set in place, that they will provide assurance, around the programme that we're building. So we've got that external scrutiny that are we doing the right things? Are we doing them in the right order? Both leaders are on that group together with the deputy leaders. So they're also holding those leaders to account to say, are you going far enough? What more could you do? So it is a critical friend to us, and it is providing that additional scrutiny that we wanted right from the outset of this programme. And final slide, please, Steve. So I won't go through this slide, but so far, the Improvement and Sustainability Programme focused on setting up the programme, the financial scrutiny that they're going through, and starting to, and forgive me, I'm going to have to turn around because I can't see that far. But the big thing that we're focused on is around the honesty and integrity about how much we can deliver through some of these change programmes, how much they will realistically deliver. It's important to say that not every improvement programme will be about cost cutting. They will be about changing the way that we respond to our customers. They'll be about the way we use digital more. What support can we give to our vulnerable customers to maybe push services to them rather than them having to look to apply to them. So all these elements will form part of the improvement plan, as well as the most important element is how do we deliver a sustainable council going forward that has good levels of reserve, has a balanced budget to deliver on its key priorities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Belle. Any comments there from other members? By all means. Just no. Councillor Denning, go on.
So, yeah, all on board for improvements. How are you going to do the metrics for it and get the data? Are you going to have a baseline to start off with? Obviously, the budget is the budget. Past years, accounts, obviously. How are you going to show it year on year?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Denning. Really good question. So the need to provide evidence in terms of the options that we present, what's the evidence base of those, what's our current performance levels, what are our realistic performance levels going forward as we move forward, what are the priority areas? So members may decide that they've got certain services that they wish to remain in top 10% performance, others they are willing to have at average levels. So there will be choices, but there will be data, and there'll also be data that shows the direction of travel. So where things are not performing to the level that we want, what are our plans to improve them? So performance information, the council plan is going to be suspended in light of the financial position. A new council plan is proposed for 1 year that will very much focus on the budget and delivering that sustainability. That will have a whole new set of performance indicators that are very much focused on our improvement journey, living within our means, and what is the impact on our residents in terms of revised service delivery.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. So I may have mentioned this before. The Labour opposition were very engaged with the original LGA peer review. We have welcomed the Improvement Board, and we welcome being members of the Improvement Board as well. I think that this has been a really important piece of work, because both the financial and cultural position of the authority going forward was unsustainable, and it has required this intervention, and it is very welcome for that from that perspective. Around the table, we hope that the discussions that we have are grown-up conversations. They can be difficult conversations. I'm not disclosing details of those conversations because many are sensitive, but I think that the outcomes potentially look very promising because of the way in which that Improvement Board is working, and the high calibre individuals that we have that are independent on that board. And saying that conversations are confidential, and the discussion and the comments that Councillor Harley made about matters relating to the time frame, and the fact that myself and the leader were at the Cabinet Summit and we made no comment on the time frame and scrutiny. Councillor Harley knows full well that's not how the conversation went, and there wasn't a facility or appropriate opportunity to be talking about timeframes and scrutiny, and we certainly didn't have the time to do that. And he has disclosed details of a confidential, or trying to incite me to disclose details of a confidential conversation that I'm not going to disclose, but I will be taking this issue up on Monday's Improvement Board, the issue of confidentiality. Myself and the leader are very concerned about some of the comments being made. We have on previous occasions brought these concerns to the attention of the Improvement Board, and we will continue to.
Again, utter froth and nonsense from Councillor Foster. There's nothing confidential at all about the timetable for consultation on the budget. It went through the budget summit, which was a Conservative Cabinet budget summit. You were invited there to try and be open and transparent, to see what common ground both Cabinet and Shadow Cabinet could find. And you were told of the timetable for scrutiny. You could have then at that point said, well, we're not quite happy there. And members around the room, Conservative cabinet members, did say, well, where will the scrutiny be? And I can't quite remember who suggested having this particular meeting, but somebody did. And at that point, you could have offered your views, your opinions, as could have Peter, but nobody did. And then we got down, no, I've not finished, I didn't interrupt you. And then when we got down to when we're going to enter the nitty gritty on what actual decisions the cabinet should make and put to, obviously, our own group and then to the wider council, yourself and Pete left the room. But before that, you had ample opportunity to argue about the timetable and the structure of scrutiny. And what I find bizarre, Chair, is that the vast majority of the contributions from the Labour Deputy Leader and their finance spokesperson has not been on the content of this budget report or of the decisions that officers and Cabinet have put forward for March the 4th. It's been about, well, we've not had enough time to talk about this. We've not had enough time to come and attend this meeting. I look at those benches, they are empty. You are talking utter nonsense because our members have been fully briefed. Absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Because our members, Elaine, have been fully briefed and they're happy with what we're putting forward. Unlike the members opposite who just haven't got a clue how to conduct themselves in control or indeed in opposition. That is a rabble of an opposition and you should be thoroughly ashamed of yourselves. Your backbenchers tonight have absolutely shown the two of you up.
Chair.
Just once,
I think
Judy.
I think that's an appalling contribution, but not unsurprising from Councillor Harling. As I say, the Improvement Board is for grown-ups, and we'll be having the grown-up discussion about confidentiality on Monday when we meet.
Right, okay. John, I'm going to...
Ask a question, and whether or not it's the Deputy Chief Executive or the Leader. But so these proposals, the presentation, I found it's not actually included in the full agenda on CMIS. It is shown there separately, but for some reason, agenda item 8 isn't in the full agenda. But I've read it now, and it's just really an assurance, really, and a question, an assurance around the robustness of what's being proposed. And in terms of the credibility of it, we've seen other local authorities be subject to 114 and working with commissioners. And obviously, when commissioners are appointed, they come in and are quite robust in their approach. Is this approach as robust and is it as credible?
Yes, it will be robust and it has to be. But I'd add something else, John. We have our political knockabout fun. Yeah, heaven forbid we should never not carry on doing that. But there's a seriousness to this. This new operating model has to be something that both main political groups have full contribution to and buy into. Because what the external auditors don't want to see is my cabinet, my group, proposing a set of changes, a change of administration, and it's unravelled, and we're back in 114 territory, or vice versa. It has to be something that both main groups can agree and move forward on. And there will be some difficult decisions that my members find unpalatable. There will be some decisions that the Labour group members will find not quite sure on that. We've seen that tonight with the House and Revenue account. I know that it's very uncomfortable with a lot of members, but those decisions take that housing revenue reserves to, after 3 years, it takes them from where they're absolutely almost wiped out to the national average within 3 years. That's quite an achievement, but I understand how difficult it is to other members of the council. And there will be equally decisions taken in the future that are unpalatable to Conservative members. But I think it has to be robust. We have to be grown up about it, and it has to have that cross-party consensus, because these decisions, regardless of whether it's a blue or a red council, will outlive the leadership of both these groups. Because best will in the world, I doubt myself, Pete, Judy and Paul Bradley will be sitting on the front bench in 10 years' time. We'll be making way for the next generation. But those decisions we take now and in the next 18 months will have to sustain us. They will last 10 years and create the financial stability the authority needs that Hilary touched on earlier on.
Thank you, Councillor Carley. Let's move on. The tracker, the business tracker for the future of the committee, the workload. Let's take it as read. Item 10. To consider questions from members of to the chair, where 2 clear days' notice have been given to the monitoring officer under Council Procedure Rule 11.8. There have been none, I understand. With that, thank you very much for this very interesting meeting, a very successful meeting,